Good evening, my friends. Sir Arthur Cretinby here again. And may I just say, I've never been so disappointed to be right. I threatened yesterday, didn't I, that there were rumblings amidst that Edinburgh Fringe was going to be cancelled. And what have they bloody announced today? Outrageous. The one little beacon of hope, the 1 month of solid work I had coming up, gone in a flutter, in a heartbeat. That's it, the diary's officially empty now. Gonna have to go out and get a proper job. It's not gonna happen, don't worry. I'll just stick to more of this. If anyone thinks I'm being a bad influence with the old wine here, it's not actually wine, it's a tall glass of balsamic vinegar, so don't you worry, nothing alcoholic going on here. God, that's tart. Marvellous! Right, tonight's story. It's a favourite of mine, actually, more of the old Edgar Allan, as you'd expect. It's one that I've been a fan of for quite a while, but not many people seem to know it, which is a great shame, so here we are. Hopefully I'll be able to educate a few of you on this wonderful little tale. I say a little tale, it's one of his longer ones, so I'm going to split it up into a few episodes. So, part 1 tonight. Put your woes to one side and focus on some fictional woes that I'm going to present for you instead. Those ones you can just brush away at the end and it doesn't really matter, does it? So here we go, my friends. A little bit of distraction for you. I do hope you enjoy. The System of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether by Edgar Allan Poe. Part 1. During the autumn of 18-something or other, while on a tour through the extreme southern provinces of France, my route led me within a few miles of a certain maison de santé, or private madhouse, about which I had heard much in Paris from my medical friends. As I had never visited a place of the kind, I thought the opportunity too good to be lost. So I proposed to my travelling companion, a gentleman with whom I had made casual acquaintance a few days before, that we should turn aside for an hour or so and look through the establishment. To this he objected. Pleading haste in the first place, and in the second a very usual horror at the sight of lunatic. He begged of me, however, not to let any mere courtesy towards himself interfere with the gratification of my curiosity, and said that he would ride on leisurely, so that I might overtake him during the day, or at all events during the next. As he bade me good-bye, I bethought me that there might be some difficulty in obtaining access to the premises, and mentioned my fears to this point. He replied that, in fact, unless I had personal knowledge of the superintendent, Monsieur Maillard, or some credential in the way of a letter, a difficulty might be found to exist, as the regulations of these private madhouses were more rigid than of the public hospitals. For himself, he added, he had some years since made the acquaintance of Maillard, and would so far assist me as to ride up to the door and introduce me, although his feelings on the subject of lunacy would not permit of his entering the house. I thanked him, and, turning from the main road, we entered a grass-grown bypath, which, in half an hour, nearly lost itself in a dense forest clothing the base of a mountain. Through this dank and gloomy wood we rode some 2 miles, when the Maison de Santé came into view. It was a fantastic chateau, much dilapidated and indeed scarcely tenantable through age and neglect. Its aspect inspired me with absolute dread, and checking my horse, I half resolved to turn back. I soon, however, grew ashamed of my weakness and proceeded. As we rode, up to the gateway, I perceived it slightly open, and the visage of a man peering through. In an instant afterward, this man came forth, accosted my companion by name, and shook him cordially by the hand, and begged him to alight. It was Monsieur Maillard himself. He was a portly, fine-looking gentleman of the old school, with a polished manner and a certain air of gravity, dignity, and authority which was very impressive. My friend, having presented me, mentioned my desire to inspect the establishment, and received Monsieur Maillard's assurance that he would show me all attention. And now he took leave, and I saw him no more. Now, when he had gone, the superintendent ushered me into a small and exceedingly neat parlour, containing, among other indications of refined taste, many books, drawings, pots of flowers, and musical instruments. A cheerful fire blazed upon the hearth. At a piano, singing an aria from Bellini, sat a young and very beautiful woman, who at my entrance paused in her song, and received me with graceful courtesy. Her voice was low, and her whole manner subdued. I thought, too, that I perceived the traces of sorrow in her countenance, which was excessively, although to my taste not unpleasingly, pale. She was attired in deep mourning, and excited in my bosom a feeling of mingled respect, interest, and admiration. I had heard in Paris that the institution of Monsieur Maillard was managed upon what is vulgarly termed the system of soothing, that all punishments were avoided, and that even confinement was seldom resorted to, that the patients, while secretly watched, were left much apparent liberty, and that most of them were permitted to roam about the house and grounds in the ordinary apparel of persons in right mind. Keeping these impressions in view, I was cautious in what I said before the young lady, for I could not be sure that she was sane, and in fact there was a certain restless brilliancy about her eyes, which half led me to imagine she was not. I confined my remarks, therefore, to general topics, and to such as I thought would not be displeasing or exciting, even to a lunatic. She replied in a perfectly rational manner to all that I said, and even her original observations were marked with the soundest good sense. But a long acquaintance with the metaphysics of mania had taught me to put no faith in such evidence of sanity, and I continued to practice, throughout the interview, the caution with which I had commenced it. Presently a smart footman in livery brought in a tray with fruit and wine and other refreshments, of which I partook, the lady soon afterward leaving the room. As she departed, I turned my eyes in an inquiring manner to my host. "No," he said, no, a member of my family, my niece, and a most accomplished woman." I beg 1,000 pardons for the suspicion, I replied, but of course you will know how to excuse me. The excellent administration of your affairs here is well understood in Paris, and I thought it just possible, well, you know. Yes, yes, say no more, or rather it is myself who should thank you for the commendable prudence you have displayed. We seldom find so much forethought in young men, and more than once some unhappy contretemps has occurred in consequence of thoughtlessness on the part of our visitors. While my former system was in operation and my patients were permitted the privilege of roaming to and fro at will, they were often aroused to dangerous frenzy by injudicious persons who called to inspect the house. Hence I was obliged to enforce a rigid system of exclusion, and none obtained access to the premises upon whose discretion I could not reply. While your former system was in operation, I said, repeating his words, do I understand then to say that the soothing system of which I have heard so much is no longer in force? It is now, he replied, several weeks since we have concluded to renounce it forever. Indeed, you astonish me. Oh, we found it, sir, he said with a sigh, absolutely necessary to return to the old usages. The danger of the soothing system was at all times appalling, and its advantages have been much overrated. I believe, sir, that in this house it has been given a fair trial, if ever in any. We did everything that rational humanity could suggest. I am sorry that you could not have paid us a visit at an earlier period, that you might have judged for yourself. But I presume you are conversant with the soothing practice, with its details. Well, not altogether. What I have heard has been at third or fourth hand. Well, I may state the system then, in general terms, as one in which the patients were humoured. We contradicted no fancies which entered the brains of the mad. On the contrary, we not only indulged, but encouraged them. And many of our most permanent cures have been thus effected. There is no argument which so touches the feeble reason of the madman as the reductio ad absurdum. We have had men, for example, who fancied themselves chickens. The cure was to insist upon the thing as a fact, to accuse the patient of stupidity in not sufficiently perceiving it to be a fact, and thus to refuse him any other diet for a week than that which properly appertained to a chicken. In this manner a little corn and gravel were made to perform wonders. But was this species of acquiescence all? Oh, by no means. We put much faith in amusements of a simple kind, such as music, dancing, gymnastic exercises generally, cards, certain classes of books, and so forth. We affected to treat each individual as for some ordinary physical disorder, and the word lunacy was never employed. A great point was to set each lunatic to guard the actions of all the others. To repose confidence in the understanding or discretion of a madman is to gain him body and soul. In this way we were enabled to dispense with an expensive body of keepers. And you had no punishments of any kind? None. And you never confined your patients? Very rarely. Now and then the malady of some individual growing to a crisis or taking a sudden turn of fury, we conveyed him to a secret cell lest his disorder should infect the rest. And there we kept him until we could dismiss him to his friends, for with the raging maniac we have nothing to do. He is usually removed to the public hospitals. And you have now changed all of this, and you think for the better. Well, decidedly. The system had its disadvantages and even its dangers, and is now happily exploded throughout all the maisons de santé of France. Well, I'm very much surprised, I said, at what you tell me, for I made sure that at this moment no other method of treatment for mania existed in any portion of the country. You are yet young, my friend, replied my host, but the time will arrive when you will learn to judge for yourself of what is going on in the world without trusting to the gossip of others. Believe nothing you hear, and only one half that you see. Now, about our maison de santé, it is clear that some ignoramus has misled you. After dinner, however, when you have sufficiently recovered from the fatigue of your ride, I will be happy to take you over the house and introduce to you a system which, in my opinion, and in that of everyone who has witnessed this operation, is incomparably the most effectual as yet devised. Your own? I inquired. One of your own invention? I am proud, he replied, to acknowledge that it is, at least in some measure. And in this manner I conversed with Monsieur Maillard for an hour or two, during which he showed me the gardens and the conservatories of the place. I cannot let you see my patients, he said, just at present. To a sensitive mind, there is always more or less of the shocking in such exhibitions, and I do not wish to spoil your appetite for dinner. We will dine. I can give you some veal with cauliflowers in a velouté sauce, and after that a glass of wine when your nerves will be sufficiently steadied. At 6, dinner was announced, and my host conducted me to a large salle à manger, where a very numerous company were assembled, 25 or 30 in all. They were apparently people of rank, certainly of high breeding, although their habiliments, I thought, were extravagantly rich, partaking somewhat too much in the ostentatious finery of the Villecourt. I noticed that at least 2/3 of these guests were ladies, and some of the latter were, well, by no means accoutred in what a Parisian would consider good taste at the present day. Many females, for example, whose age could not have been less than 70, were bedecked in a profusion of jewellery, such as rings, bracelets, and earrings, and wore their bosoms and arms shamefully bare. I observed, too, that very few of the dresses were well made, or at least that very few of them fitted the wearers. In looking about, I discovered the interesting girl to whom Monsieur Maillard had presented me in the little parlour, but my surprise was great to see her wearing a hoop and farthingale, with high-heeled shoes and a dirty cap of Brussels lace, so much too large for her that it gave her face a ridiculously diminutive expression. When I had first seen her, she was attired most becomingly in deep mourning. There was an air of oddity, in short, about the dress of the whole party, which at first caused me to recur to my original idea of the soothing system, and to fancy that Monsieur Maillard had been willing to deceive me until after dinner, that I might experience no uncomfortable feelings during the repast at finding myself dining with lunatics. But I remembered having been informed in Paris that the southern provincialists were a peculiarly eccentric people, with a vast number of antiquated notions, and then, too, upon conversing with several members of the company, my apprehensions were immediately and fully dispelled. The dining-room itself, although perhaps sufficiently comfortable and of good dimensions, had nothing too much of elegance about it. For example, the floor was uncarpeted. In France, however, a carpet is frequently dispensed with. The windows, too, were without curtains. The shutters, being shut, were securely fastened with iron bars, applied diagonally after the fashion of our shop shutters. Let me see. The apartment, I observed, formed in itself a wing of the chateau, and thus the windows were on 3 sides of the parallelogram, the door being at the other. There were no less than 10 windows in all. The table was superbly set out. It was loaded with plate and more than loaded with delicacies. The profusion was absolutely barbaric. There were meats enough to have feasted the Anakim. Never in all my life have I witnessed so lavish, so wasteful an expenditure of the good things in life. There seemed very little taste, however, in the arrangements, and my eyes, accustomed to quiet lights, were sadly offended by the prodigious glare of a multitude of wax candles, which, in silver candelabra, were deposited upon the table and all about the room, wherever it were possible to find a place. There were several active servants in attendance, and upon a large table at the farther end of the apartment were seated 7 or 8 people with fiddles, fifes, trombones, and a drum. These fellows annoyed me very much. At intervals, during the repast, by an infinite variety of noises which were intended for music, and which appeared to afford much entertainment to all present, with the exception of myself. And there we have it, my friends, a most intriguing and enigmatic introduction to the system of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether. I'm sure you'll agree. But you'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what sort of pickle our hero has found himself in. I do hope you join me for it. I do hope that you are still gleaning some small pleasure from my dramatic readings, my outputs, as 'twere. Do let me know either way. For God's sake, tell me if I should just stop, or even if you want more, or something else, something, anything, I don't care. This is just a thing, isn't it? It's a thing. Let's keep doing a thing. Not much else to do, is there? See you tomorrow.